I think we've reached a point now in human evolution where we're ready to at least attempt to understand that all religions, all spiritual traditions are arising from this one deeper aspect of the psyche that connects them all.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Soul Sessions with Creative Mind. I'm Deborah Burnt Maldonado. I'm here with Dr. Rob Maldonado, and we have another great episode for you today about Carl Jung, and we're talking about religious and spiritual symbols and the archetypes. So very, very juicy topic today. But before we begin, I do want to remind you to click here if you're watching us on YouTube and subscribe to our channel. And if you have any comments, any suggestions, we want to hear from you. Just post in the comments. We really want to hear what you'd like to hear more about, and even ask us questions about what we cover in any of our shows. We're always reading the comments, so don't be shy. Let's get down to it. It is another powerful part of Jung's work, religious and spiritual symbols.
Absolutely. I mean, this is where, in a way, he becomes very controversial through this work. But if you look at the big picture, if you're really interested in studying the human psyche, why would you leave out religion and spiritual practices? I mean, this has been the core of human culture since the beginning of time. People in the beginning would worship stones and say...
and the sun, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It is an integral part of being a human being, and probably one of the most important aspects of the human experience. Yet people feel that it's untouchable. It's a taboo to study it as,
or even speak about it. People don't share or talk about what they believe.
Absolutely. So Jung said, okay, I get it. I might be criticized for this. I might be ostracized from the scientific community, but it's worth it because it's important. So let's start with his idea of the collective unconscious, right? Itself very controversial still today, but more and more people are understanding as we learn more about genetics and epigenetics and culture that it's a viable way of understanding how different human cultures in different times came up with very similar systems of conduct and very similar points of view of the universe because it connects us all. So let's look at some of the details of this.
So the collective unconscious, just to define it for those who do not know Jung or are new to Jung, is that he believed that the unconscious isn't just a Freudian subconscious, which is just a repository of repressed memories and rejected aspects of ourselves, emotions that we suppress. But he sees the unconscious as both a personal, where he said that there are those elements that are shaped, that we're not conscious of by our conditioning in our life, but there's also a collective that we're born with, that there's these instinctual, ties us as a human being, or even as a being on this planet, to function in the world. There's those patterns that are universal that we inherit. We don't come as a clean slate. And we're just shaped by our parents, and everything's our parents' fault. Is that we're coming as an element of humanity, and even a beingness in this world, in these cosmos of these larger patterns. And that's the collective unconscious, is the collective parts. And it's not that it's unconscious, that it's like dormant. Again, it is that we're not conscious of it. So it's like the fish in water doesn't know it's in water. So we're swimming in the collective unconscious, but we can't recognize it. And so today we're talking about the symbols that really kind of help us understand the collective unconscious, because we can't really see it directly. We see it through symbols.
Yeah. And we would say the difference between spirituality and religion is that religion is more the practice, the ritual, and the institutional practices that evolved at the cultural level that often house those spiritual traditions. And, it's not perfect, of course. It's run by human beings. It's created and supported by human beings. So they're going to be imperfect systems, but we should not discard them or discount them simply because of those facts. Every system on the planet that humans have evolved is imperfect, but we should try to understand them and learn as much as possible as to why have they been so important for human beings for such a long time, both spirituality and religious practices. The great Swami Vivekananda said, if you look at all religions, they have three things in common. They all have a philosophy, they have a ritualistic system or pattern, and they have a mythology that feeds and supports that religion.
Like the story of Jesus or the Buddha sitting under the Bodhi tree, or Muhammad. Like there's all these different stories and myths that carry us.
And the spirituality would be the individual's experience, not just of those philosophies, mythologies, and rituals, but the individual's own subjective synthesis and interpretation of those experiences.
So let's get into some of the symbols.
Yeah, so Jung, he was fascinated by Catholicism because he saw it as, here's my chance to study a living religion that contains a lot of the historical symbols that go back to pagan times, right? Pre-Christian times.
Lots of rituals, lots of saints and deities, and the myths, and just even the icons that come up with Christianity. They even have a saint for everything you can think of. There's a saint for, I didn't realize, like a saint for if you lost something, or a saint if you have cancer, or a saint if you are grieving. There's like a saint for everything. So very, very mystical, like there's a saint to pray for, almost as if like the Romans, because they had the gods, the different gods. It's like, how do you have one god, but how do you still play out all these characters?
Or the pantheon of gods that you see in India or other Eastern cultures, where it's closer to animism, where nature was seen as a living process, and that everything had a spirit in it. The trees, the rocks, water, the clouds all had a spiritual weight to them.
And so with the Catholic Mass, there is a profound psychological process.
You were raised Catholic.
I was raised Catholic.
I was not.
Yeah.
But I can certainly see the beauty, just like Jung, and the symbols, the rich symbolism in the temples and in the Mass. We were recently in Europe, in Vienna, and some of these incredible Catholic churches, you walk right in, and there you see a big mandala right at the top of the doorway in stained glass. I don't need to be connected to the tradition to understand that's a symbol of wholeness right there, right? Like it's a mandala, essentially.
Yeah.
A symbol of unity and wholeness, which represents the true self.
And even the Trinity, because in Eastern philosophy, there's waking, dreaming, sleeping state, and then the Trinity, there's the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. It's like the kind of a lot of the same patterns show up. So let's examine some of them.
So you went through the...
I went through...
Communion,
my first communion, and it was taking the body and blood of Christ into my mouth, and okay, like when you're 11 years old, I think I was younger. I was 7 years old. You're just like, okay, my mother would say you're having the body and blood of Jesus. That's the symbol. And it was very profound to you feel like kind of like you're taking spirit and putting it in your body.
Yeah. So symbolically, if we look at this ritual, symbolically means the union of opposites. Matter and spirit, right? Or the earthly life of the human being connected to the divine.
And I remember the rules were that if you didn't go to confession, you weren't allowed to partake in the Eucharist because you were not pure, and so you have to go ask for confession, and then you're pure. You're pure enough to have this integration. And so confession is also one of the symbols that
Well, it's a ritual. That Jung saw as the beginning of shadow work, where you're acknowledging that your sin or your trespassing of the law is connected to your experience with your neighbor, but that it's reflecting something within you, right? It's the beginning of reintegration or redemption for the individual.
And sin is actually an archery term. It means you miss the mark. It doesn't mean that it's evil or bad. It's just you were off base. And so it's about, it's basically symbolizing, realigning the mind, aligning with with the divine versus the human nature,
Right.
and seeing things in clarity. And also too, I remember during Easter time, we had to give up something for Lent for 40 days and 40 nights. I always gave up like chocolate. I didn't want to, not something too challenging, but yeah, we would always give up something that we cared about that would make meaning to give up for 40 days. And then on Easter, we got to eat our chocolate, with the Easter bunny, which I don't know where the Easter bunny came from as far as the Catholic religion, but...
well, again, it goes back to pagan times.
Oh, yeah.
Because of
rabbit.
The rabbit's fertility, right? They breed like rabbits.
They didn't tell us then when we were younger. It was just this bunny that comes and brings us baskets of stuff. But anyway, yeah, that whole process of sacrifice or fasting, very, very important. It's like you're giving up your earthly desires for a higher desire.
So their sacrifice is both a ritual, but it's also goes back to the mythology that Jesus was a sacrificial lamb for humanity's sin.
He died for our sins.
Yeah, as a redemption, right? As a token of redemption. And of course, these are also pagan traditions where the sacrifice connected what you would have to do to survive in the earthly plane to the gods, to the realm of the divine.
The lamb, sacrificial lamb.
Yeah.
And then even in cultures such like the Mayans, they would do sacrifices to, have for, the rain coming or, the wars and things like that. That was part of a symbolic way of a ritual related to that.
Yeah, when the Spaniards conquered the Aztec Empire, the Aztecs recognized many of the symbols in Christianity and Catholicism. They were already part of their own religious tradition. They understood sacrifice, right? They understood the human sacrifice, which was the main symbol of Christianity, the human
Jesus,
being sacrificed on the cross. They understood that perfectly. So it wasn't that alien to them. They understood the cleansing properties of blood symbolically, right? That the blood symbolizes the sacrifice that humans can make to atone for the work that they have to do, the killing of animals to survive and so forth.
Also, too, when we're talking about these symbols, these show up in dreams. And so even if you're not raised Catholic or are from the Mayan culture, there's these universal symbols that will show up. And we often see our students say, I had a dream about like blood, or I had a dream about something, sacrificing, like who was I going to sacrifice? And we want to look at this in a more symbolic way versus taking them very literally. One of the other things I noticed too, that you taught me, is that the church itself is the mother. And so dreaming about a church is like the mother archetype, which I found fascinating to think, but it is true. Like it's like a house. It's a place. It's matter, a place of where matter meets the spirit. It's a housing of the spirit in the material world.
Yeah. And this union of opposites, right? That you have the spiritual father and the feminine church uniting. Often in Catholicism, it's represented as Jesus as the bridegroom and the church as the bride. And in union, it represents that kind of transcendence of both, right? That a new being comes into existence in the union of these opposites. So transcendence of the ego, of course, is at the core of most spiritual traditions on earth. And you see it in the religion, of course. Paul says something like, I must decrease so that he, meaning Jesus, can increase, meaning the divine is Jesus as representative of the higher self, can then house or inhabit the body, so that the individual ego is put in its right place as a servant, not as the leader of the house of the body.
Yeah. It's a really powerful way to think about your life, is instead of just fixing your ego, to put it in its place and allow this other aspect of you that has been untouched by your personal experience, that is fresh and transpersonal, into your life. That's really the idea, is like letting Jesus in your heart, letting God in your heart, allow the divine to step in, grace to step into your life.
Yeah.
And that usually happens when people are kind of going through a tough time. It's like they can't get anything from the world, so they have to go inward. And they have to kind of hand themselves over, like you said, like decreasing themselves to allow the divine to increase.
Yeah, and so Jung's contribution here, besides this idea of the collective unconscious, has really deep implications for modern times. One of them is that it's a way of uniting all religious and spiritual systems. It's a way of understanding that there's an underlying function, psychological, spiritual function at the base of all human religious experiences, which is the collective unconscious. So if we ask, where do these symbols come from and what gives them their power? Well, they come from the collective unconscious, meaning it's a reservoir of all human experience since the beginning of time that we're drawing from, or that individual humans are experiencing through dreams, through visions, through inspiration, that are coming, welling up from the collective unconscious, and then having a powerful influence in history, not only the individual's history, but the collective history, right?
Like we can have, if we wake up from our ego, imagine the impact we can have on, and there's the collective unconscious, but there's also the collective consciousness, which is the soup we're all living in. And the more people that awaken, we could shift humanity where it's going.
Yes.
Would you also say too, I think the animals have access to the collective unconscious, because you see they have similar rituals. Like they have like a spiritual, not all animals, but there's like a spiritual element, like the mating rituals, and what comes to mind is that fish that makes that elaborate like design to attract the mate. It's like, where does that come from? There must be a collective mind that it taps into, that it comes from. And maybe we call it genetics and, conditioning from its DNA adaptation and all that, but it's like the force behind that, like is that collective?
Yeah, I think Jung would say that is the collective unconscious, that animals are simply playing out their destiny through this following these archetypal patterns that are already inherent in them. But it's also going on in human life. I think we've reached a point now in human evolution where we're ready to at least attempt to understand that all religions, all spiritual traditions are arising from this one deeper aspect of the psyche that connects them all.
Yeah.
So that we're not falsely and superficially dividing everyone and saying, mine is better than yours.
Yeah. You know what is interesting? When the pandemic first started, I felt this sense of we were all kind of facing this unknown together. We were all kind of sitting there watching the news, and everyone's kind of like locked down, and there was no like vaccinations, there was no cure, and very, very unknown. The first time in all of us in our history, maybe there was one or two people who lived through the last one. And it was this kind of unity I kind of felt, that we were all kind of going through the same thing, but it didn't last. And immediately people started dividing themselves over how they saw this experience. But there's that moment where everyone's kind of united. And I saw the same thing happen September 11th. That day, we were all as Americans so united, like in grief and what happened. And then very quickly, like a couple days later, people started picking their sides and their interpretation of what happened, and it became very divided again. But it's like, why do we do that? Why do we, we're all come from the same stuff. And then why do we need to divide? Maybe it's part of the process is to have the duality, to dance out. I don't know. What do you think? Asking you a philosophical question right now.
Well, like we were talking in the beginning, right? That the opposites create tension, but they're essential for creation because it's what also generates the fuel of the psyche. Without opposites, you would have no drama.
Yeah, we would need
evolution.
that. And it's almost like we need to kind of be at odds with each other in a way to figure out what it's like, reflecting the things that we're not conscious of, like what you see, who someone believes the opposite of you is in your unconscious, that you're not able to see. And so it's a way for us to see all parts of ourselves.
Yeah. So there's two aspects to everything, right? And so one of them is division, that the opposites can create division, but also opposites can create energy and movement and harmony. It's about understanding this principle, right? That we're always going to feel tension between us and them, right? Anyone that's different, or anyone who has a different belief system or has interpreted these same symbols that arise from the collective unconscious in their own unique way, which is
like
what
even in their own unique religion, right?
Yeah, that's what it is.
My religion, that's my symbol, and then my religion's better than your religion. Or,
that tension is always going to be there, but that it's also an opportunity to generate new ideas and movement and evolving of spirituality. That if we take it as that, then it becomes potential.
Like being curious about the tension versus wanting to just get rid of it or judge the people that are causing tension, because it takes two to cause tension. It's not just the other side. It's always the two sides disagreeing. But that's where I think magic can happen. Like Jung says that when two personalities come together, if there's a reaction, there's transformation. I'm paraphrasing right now, but that's really what it is. It's that spark that it invites us in to see something more.
Yeah, the main tension now is really the way it's playing out is the tension between the scientific perspective of seeing the Big Bang as the creation myth and the traditional spiritual or religious perspective that sees God as the foundational principle. The tension between these two opposing points of view and creation myths is what we're dealing with essentially. What the potential is, of course, is a new synthesis that will be born from these two ways of seeing the world.
And there's a room for both. There's room for, I think, religion and God and spirituality has a place, and science has a place. And if it could be integrated, that would be amazing. You know, to be able to see this, where the overlap is, where we meet in the middle.
Yes, and that is Jung's contribution right there. That he gives us a way to understand that tension psychologically. In other words, as a scientific perspective on the nature of human experience, that there is this collective unconscious that we're all sharing. So if you ask, what is the commonality amongst everyone on the planet, and maybe even people on other planets or beings on other planets, it's this collective unconscious that we all share. There's no distinction whether we think of it as the origins of the universe as the Big Bang, or the origins of the universe as this divine being, or somewhere in between, right? That is the commonality. We're all seeing it from our own interpretation, our own individual and cultural interpretation, but its essence, its roots lie in the collective unconscious.
Well, what's interesting is that the science now, going into quantum physics, is now starting to see the mystical part of what we're experiencing. And they said that a lot of the astronauts in the 70s, and when they went up into space, they were hardcore scientists. And then they looked at the universe from the world and the earth, and they were like, how could there not be a God? You're like, they're a divine being that created all this. Like they became like religious or spiritual by having those experiences. So no matter where people are, I love what you said, Rob. You always say that see someone as becoming, because we're all going to grow up in different religions. We're all going to grow up in different societies, and we're all kind of starting our journey in different places. And just because we started somewhere doesn't mean we're ending up there, and that we could kind of use Jung's process of individuation to find our answers wherever we're at. Like, we don't need to change religions. If you want to say Catholic, use the symbols, and then you'll come to the same conclusion that he did, of that oneness. And it can be in your language, your symbols, your, philosophy, but you'll see all paths lead to the same truth. Krishna even said that, is that honor people on their path, and they will lead to the truth if they keep looking for it and they're seeking it. And I think everyone at some level is seeking the truth. Yeah. Hopefully. I mean, some more than others, but that kind of idea, like holding the image of someone seeking the truth, and no matter how lost they are, it is a beautiful thing for us to make an impact on humanity, just holding that space for that person.
Yeah, because we're not as divided as the media or the internet makes it us out to be.
Yeah.
The vocal minorities that kind of stoke this sense of division are that they're small minority compared to the majority of the people. Most people simply are interested in what their neighbors are interested in, having a good life, being happy, taking care of their family, doing good work. The division simply appears as this phenomena through the filter of these mediums that we use. So keep that in mind, but how does this become practical for us, this contribution that Jung is making to our understanding of religious and spiritual symbolism? First of all, it's giving us a way to understand our human need for transcendence, that it's a universal need, no matter if you're a scientist or somebody who's a devout religious person. It's the same principle that's prompting you to seek that higher knowledge, right? That understanding. So if we understand it as thus, then we can see that we're not that different. It's simply different ways of approaching that quest for truth and for understanding.
Yeah, those three questions is, who am I? What is the world? Who am I? What was the third question that people ask? What is God?
Yes, and often if you look at religion and spiritual traditions, they're aiming to answer the bigger question of what happens after the body dies, right? Where do I go, or is this the end? And those questions are also asked by science. They're not different. It's simply a different paradigm, a different substructure of assumptions about what the nature of the universe is.
Well, even now, like the scientists, the medical, there's some research on people who have cancer and those who have a strong sense of purpose. How do you measure that? Like, it's not a tangible thing, but it's just like will to live, purpose to live. They tend to heal faster and more completely than those who have no like mission or faith or a meaning in their life. And then those who don't tend to be more sick, because there really isn't that flame of light, that reason for being. And it's so important, more than just paying your bills, finding a partner, making sure you have a nice car to drive around in, a good job. You want to have meaning in your life, and you want to have a spiritual connection, because if you don't, it will feel, no matter who you are, how rational, scientific you are, you will kind of feel like something's missing.
Yes. Another practice that we can all start to do today is drop the judgment on good and bad, right? Instead of depending on that ego function of what's good for me and what obstructs my path to fulfillment of my happiness, just think in terms of what connects me to every other person on this planet, right? We know that we all depend on other people. Other people weave our clothes. Other people bring the food to the marketplace so we can go buy it. Other people mow the lawn. Other people do all kinds of work.
There's someone behind the internet making sure it's working, and the electricity, and
we're
building the computers.
We're all in this interdependent kind
culture.
of web of life.
Yeah.
With, not only with other people, but with animals and plants and probably the whole solar system and the whole galaxy, right? So start to open your mind to these possibilities, this new way of seeing things, instead of just depending on your personal ego perspective.
I have one more thing, going back to like having a purpose, that within that realm of everyone contributing, that there's something you have each individual person has, that you're bringing to the world, that you were meant to bring to the world. And if you're not conscious of it yet, ask that question, like, who am I supposed to, what is my gift? What is my role in this huge society that we have that contributes in some way? And when you're a part of that, you're a part of we're a human race. We start to feel that we all have a place, we all have a purpose, we all have meaning, we all have importance. That's a beautiful thing. We started like that in tribes. Everyone had their role. And as we gotten larger and larger as a human race, we kind of lost what our role was. And I think it's really important to find your purpose. I think it was Thoreau who said the two most important days of your life are the day you were born and then the day you realized why. All of this ties into a spiritual life and that knowing that there's something more to you, sacrificing that, making yourself smaller so the divine can step in and do the job it wants to be expressed through you.
Yeah, and then at the individual level, Jung always emphasized that these symbols and these archetypal symbols, he called them these numinous, powerful symbols, meaning that they have an internal power to transform your life and the life of the culture by extension. They're going to come through individual dreams. In other words, it's the individual that has these dreams and visions, and these symbols come through our individual experiences. So pay attention to your dreams. And you might already have, like if you remember your childhood dreams or your dreams in general, there probably already are these incredible numinous symbols that have come up through the collective unconscious in your individual dreams.
So write them down, even what you remember, and there's something powerful about getting it out of your mind into the physical world. It's integration again, like journaling, getting your thoughts on your mind, confession, like all these things about bringing it from one state to another is integration.
That's right.
I thoroughly enjoyed this, especially talking about my old Catholicism growing up. And we're not going to talk about the guilt, the Catholic guilt. But yeah, it's really powerful to look at symbols in that way. And then it also helps you see that so many other religious traditions and spiritual traditions, what they have in common and how we all are one. And I think that's the message of today's podcast is really just that we're one. And how do we find more commonality with each other and more oneness with each other than division?
Absolutely.
That's what's going to change the world. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for joining us. Again, if you are watching us on YouTube and you love this show today and you want to hear more, please click the button here and the button in the corner to subscribe to our channel. Leave us comments either on YouTube or on our podcast. We'd love to hear what you have to say. I'm really excited for bringing you this great content for you to deepen your mind of these wonderful concepts.
See you next time.
Take care. Bye-bye.